Iltam Sumra Rashupti Ilatim.
Did you know Cold Steel sells steel Kopeshes for like 95 bucks a piece? Pick this little beauty up. Do I know how to use it properly? No. Do I want to know how to use it properly? Yes, if I don't have to pay. Fuck, I hate the balance on this. Is cool as shit, man, but I fucking hate the balance on this thing. Look at this shit. No, where is it? Where is it? Oh my god. There it is. Look at how far that is from the handle. And the worst part is, it wedges out. So I have to hold it down here, because if I hold it here, my hand just slips down until it's holding this thing. And it feels... This is more top heavy than the axe. Well, I guess that's why it's $95. Whatever. It can still cut shit like a motherfucker, so... who cares? Anyways, this is relevant because we're gonna talk about the Bronze Age today. Just to be frank, I am not a historian. I'm barely an armchair historian, if you could call it that. Hi, I'm Alexander. I'm a novelist. I've written 7 books. None of them are published yet, but pretty much all the information. And do not use this video as like a stone tablet or like a guide to Bronze Age history. I could not know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm going off like Wikipedia, a couple history books, and a podcast. I just wanted to get that disclaimer out of the way. Do not look to me for historical accuracy. I don't want to be responsible for that. I'll need that smoke. So I picked up Total War Troy for the first time today off the Steam Summer Sale, and I played it and I was like, holy shit, this is the Bronze Age game I've been fucking waiting for. I think Troy gets a bad rap, okay? It's not a perfect Total War game, but it's the Bronze Age. And then I saw a Total War Pharaoh was coming out and it had even more Bronze Age and the same engine as Total War Troy, and I was like, I do not care that it's probably going to just be the same game with a different coat of paint. It's the Bronze Age. Now, the Bronze Age collapse is probably one of my favorite eras in history of all time. Out of all time. It is my favorite period in history. Challenged by a couple other periods in history. But, oh my god, the Bronze Age is so cool. It's so cool. And I'm gonna tell you why it's so cool for how long is this video? For those who don't know, the Bronze Age, or more accurately what we're going to be talking about today is the Bronze Age collapse, was a period in history when everything broke. God said, civilization machine broke, have a nice day, and the world died. Except Egypt. Now, you might be saying, Alexander, there's no way every civilization just died. No. I mean, it didn't all die. Obviously, there's still people around. But, like, there are no countries or kingdoms as we could, like, describe them except for Egypt. Like a little baby man chunk in Assyria. I think China was still a thing at that point in time, but everyone else, nope, none of that, no civilization at all. I mean, people still inhabited like cities and stuff that were previously built, but like no records, no, like, just a complete dark age for like 700 years. It was a while, but yeah, everything just died. And no one knew why for like thousands of years. And even now, we still don't really know why it happened. Mostly because it was kind of a little bit of everything.
Trade networks and regional powers.
So, in order for pretty much every civilization in the world to just fucking die, a couple of things have to happen first. A lot of things. And a lot of things have to go very, very wrong for that to happen. And one of those things is overcomplexity with their trade networks. Usually we have this idea in our heads that the further back in time you go, the smaller the world was. And frankly, that's not an unfounded point of view. The world certainly was smaller back in the Bronze Age, and to your average person, they probably thought like the people 5 miles north of them were like completely culturally different barbarians who deserved an axe to the head. But in terms of trade, the late Bronze Age was actually like super complex. Like you had trade networks going all the way from Britain to Afghanistan, all in search primarily of tin. The reason everyone wanted tin is because tin is one of the parts you need in order to make bronze. Bronze is an alloy of tin and copper. So, no tin, no bronze, sorry. This kind of proved to be a problem because tin, like large tin deposits, are only found in specific areas. The two biggest ones were in Afghanistan and Britain, which are pretty damn far from the Fertile Crescent, which, you know, if you guys went to world history at all,
Shinji, crank that.
Euphrates River! Euphrates River. Hey, I got a new lesson for you about ancient Mesopotamia. Euphrates River and the Tigris River form the cradle of civilization. Akkadians long ago conquered Sumer, took control. Sargon led his armies in their chariots. They rolled by the Euphrates River.
These places where you got tin were very far from the center of civilization at the time, which was the Fertile Crescent and the Eastern Mediterranean. So in order to compensate for this, people kind of just defied all the odds and stretched out their trade networks all the way to Britain and Afghanistan to get tin. Their sailing technology wasn't exactly the best, and, you know, sometimes when people want trade goods from very far away and are unable or unwilling to produce it in their home country, they have to rely on a different country that is not under their direct jurisdiction in order to get that resource. Now, depending on how vital that resource is, this situation might be a minor inconvenience or a massive problem. In this case, it was a massive problem because as a bunch of other shit hit the fan, you get a scenario, people just don't want to go that far to find tin. So you spend hundreds of years spreading out like this web of trade networks all across the like Afro-Eurasia, and then suddenly like God bitch slaps pretty much the entire world, and it just kind of pops. And this is a problem, because if you start relying on other people for vital resources, like not just tin, but also food, timber, stone, and, you know, tons of other necessary things to make civilization work, and you suddenly lose contact with all those places, or it suddenly becomes a lot harder to trade, you can't do civilization anymore because you don't have any of the building blocks. This is a lot like our time. I am very conspicuously making an allusion to the modern day. We are fucked. Anyway, trade over complexity aside, there were a couple globs of proverbial shit that hit the fan that were a bit more direct than trade complexity. But I thought that one was topical, so I got it out of the way first. Turns out, civilization's not doing so great when things happen, certain things like droughts, where the decades around the Bronze Age collapse were one of the driest in the time, and, you know, that makes it... I don't have to explain to you guys why people need water. Fuck. But in addition to that, and a couple climate change things. There was a small mini like cold period transitioning into the Bronze Age, which, you know, cold period in addition to drought, bad for crop. No crop means no food. No food mean no bread. No bread mean no people.
Bread. 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 Bread.
Oh, also, in case you didn't know, bubonic plague. Yeah, that's not just a medieval thing. That shit came back like 3 times. You know, we keep letting that motherfucker pull up on us, and it just never goes away. All right, he hit us back in the medieval age. Obviously, that's the one everyone knows about, where a third of Europe died. It hit Europe a second time during the rule of Justinian the Great. It's got to have hit a couple more times before then, and it hit during the Bronze Age collapse. Obviously, plague equal no people. No people equal no society. No society equal nothing. A lot of the societies during the Bronze Age were very hierarchical, and if you take out the labor base, the noble classes, who are basically almost completely reliant on the working and like peasant class, if they don't have that, it's a bad time for them. You could attribute the collapse of those societies to all those natural disasters, but you could also say that those societies kind of did it to themselves.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Because all the civilizations around the Fertile Crescent, like Egypt and Mesopotamia specifically, were based around very central river systems where if you went too far away from the river system, it's just scrubland and desert. You kind of have to stay next to the river, and that's not great if you value your freedom, because suddenly whoever's at the fucking the top of the river, whoever's more upriver gets to exert direct control on everyone downriver of that guy. So it was very, very easy to control the population and create a super authoritarian government that has like zero reason to give anything back to the populace, because why should they don't have to. So, you know, your average Egyptian and average Mesopotamian, not a great life. Also, if you came from those river valley areas, your diet was kind of shit as well, because it was pretty much just bread.
Bread. Bread. Bread. Bread. Bread. Bread.
Newsflash: if you eat just bread, you get weak. You get no variety in your nutrients, and you get small, and you get floppy and stout. And I think there was a thing apparently where someone estimated like way too many Egyptians back in the day had like some kind of stomach parasite. It's not good. But yeah, so it's super over centralized, and the noble classes are all very decadent because they don't really do anything. They do chariots, and they do writing, and that's about it. And you know, usually in this situation, you think, oh, okay, so that kind of explains why Egypt, for however long, has been under the rule of foreign empires and has been very easy to control as one continuous region. It's not that set in stone, right? If you're eventually, at a certain point, enough is enough. What you get is huge de-urbanization, where people who are in the cities run away from the cities and run into the countryside. And I know I said that you couldn't do that a lot, but with some new technology, including the discovery of iron, made it possible to farm more difficult to farm areas, since you could use iron to make better plows instead of, you know, using a wood one, which you would have had to do before, because all the bronze had to go to making weapons and armor. So now people can run away, so they do that because duh. And then suddenly that labor pool, that peasant pool shrank from all those natural disasters, shrinks even more. It's even more. Let's say you're an Egyptian pharaoh or a Mesopotamian king. All your people are leaving. You have no worker base. It's fine. It's okay. You're all good, man. Because you know what? New people are always moving in. Barbarians are always moving in. Yes, the most infamous of the causes of the Bronze Age collapse are the mysterious sea people and related raider groups. Because cool thing about societal collapse is that a lot of the time you get stuff where people start moving in big chunks all over the place, and they move into places, and people who are in those places first don't like that those people are moving into those places, so they start fighting with each other. And usually the people who move in are the better fighters because they've lived in the wild for forever, so they beat the shit out of the civilized people and then become the civilized people. This was the Germans back in the what was it? Late antiquity. That's what it was. That's one of my favorite periods too. I'm noticing a trend here. Regardless, you get all these people coming in. You get the sea people who are theorized to be a sort of pirate confederacy of a bunch of Greeks and Anatolians who got on ships because their homelands were being invaded. So they went down to Egypt and to the Levant and pillaged the shit out of it and kicked everyone's asses. But in addition to the sea people, you get the Dorians, which, if you don't know, the area around the Aegean Sea and Greece was first inhabited by the Minoans, who were we think, pacifist group of people who built these dope-ass palace complexes. They pretty much just did agriculture, and there are no remains of their weapons or armor. We're pretty sure they just didn't do war ever. However, this kind of sucked for them when the Mycenaeans, who you might know from the Iliad, the Achaeans, Agamemnon, Achilles, Odysseus, all of them, they are Mycenaeans. They came in, fucking folded the Minoans, and then they ruled for however long. They did a quick road trip over to Troy, came back, and then they got their asses handed to them by the Dorians, who, the Dorians, in combination with a couple other barbarian tribes, make up the ethnicity that we know as, the ancient Greeks, I think. Yeah. So the Dorians invading Greece, you have the sea people invading Egypt and the Levant, and then all the way over in Persia and India, you got the Indo-Aryans, who are the people that Funny Mustache Man was talking about. Basically, the Indo-Aryans are these, they're horse people. They're the first horse people. They did a horse people to the entire continent of Eurasia. Well, most of it. A good chunk of it. They apparently started out in Ukraine and just, horse. I personally know most about them through their mythology, or at least the descendants of their mythology. Because if you've ever noticed that there are similarities between Norse, Slavic, Greek, Celtic, Iranian, and Hindu mythology, that's why. It's because all those people descended from the Indo-Aryans. But yeah, Indo-Aryans invade Iran, beat the shit out of everyone, mostly the Elamites, and then they move on to India, beat the shit out of the native Indians, establish the caste system and establish the caste system and the fucking what are the texts? I forgot the holy texts. But yeah, everyone's schmoving into already settled areas and just fucking shit up. They either pillage and leave, or they pillage and stay. Both scenarios not great for the pre-established civilizations. Now, a lot of stuff happens as a result of all this shit hitting our proverbial fan, and one of my favorites are the changes made to warfare. Now, you see this a lot whenever societies seem like on the brink of collapse or about to collapse, in sort of the way military doctrine works. What you get before a civilization collapses but is about to collapse is a highly hierarchical military. So basically, this is where your warrior classes come in. It's where fighting is very restricted to the upper classes, and you have a population that can't arm itself and can't do anything about like someone storming into their village and murdering everyone. Now, this doesn't always coincide with a civilizational collapse. One major thing that kind of breaks away from a proverbial cycle is the invention of gunpowder and the widespread use of guns, because guns are the great equalizer. You don't have to have a ton of skill in order to fire and kill someone with a gun. Although guns are like low skill to use, very hard to master sort of weapons, but it still made arming your military like super easy. You could just hand out rifles to people, give them a little bit of training, and they're good. Now, if you lived in the late Middle Ages, you were kind of fucked if you didn't own like decent armor, because you got all these bows and crossbows and fancy weapons and shit that are designed to break through armor and punch through your defenses, that if you don't have the tip-top defenses, you kind of shit out of luck. You also need to learn how to use all of those things, which takes a ton of training, which is why you had the knightly class, and that had its own culture. You kind of have the same issues in Japan with the samurai, and here, as well as in China, you have chariots. Chariots, for those who don't know, who doesn't know what a chariot is? Okay, whatever. Chariots are carts with wheels pulled by horses, and usually manned by like at least two people. One person to drive the chariot, one person to fight. In the Bronze Age, it was more of a like 3 to 4 person job. So having a chariot was basically like having a tank, but without the armor. But it was scary as hell. And in the past, prior to the Bronze Age collapse, what would happen is you would have battlefields that were dominated by chariots. However, in order to have a chariot, you need like 2 to 4 horses, which, all the time that goes into raising those, all the food that goes into raising those, and then all the training that goes into teaching them not to be afraid of the fucking giant thing of arrows coming at them. I guess they didn't have a lot of bowmen back then. It was mostly slings. I learned how to shoot one of those. You need 2 to 4 horses. You need all the materials to equip those horses and attach them to the chariot. You need all the materials to build the chariot, and the people with the necessary skills to build the chariot, and all the time and energy that goes into training that. And then, on the chariot, you need one person who knows how to drive a chariot. You need one person who knows how to fight from the top of a chariot, and sometimes you need one person who knows how to shoot from the top of a chariot. If you ever tried shooting a bow and arrow while not standing still, it sucks ass, unless you're using one of those fucking like Mongol recurve bows that, even then, still hard as hell. Like the fucking horse tribes of Eurasia would spend like that was pretty much their whole lives, is just learning how to shoot from horseback. It fucking sucks, dude. And even with guns, like shooting from a car, whew, don't ask me how I know that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of resources going into each and every one of these chariots. So that's a very high risk. But in the past, it would give you a ton of reward. Chariots are fucking just, barrel through and kill your infantry. 2 things happened that kind of made the chariots die. First was the ability to cast bronze. Now, in order to cast a metal, you have to melt it into a liquid form, which for bronze works pretty well. For other metals, it's not it. Which is, there's a reason why cast iron is different from like regular iron. Cast iron sucks for weapons. Beforehand, people would forge bronze, and If you've ever seen Forged in Fire, it's a pain in the ass. Plus, they don't have the power hammer. I don't even think they have anvils, because you need iron to make an anvil. Point is, it was a pain in the ass to make weapons, but you get around to casting. All you have to do is make a mold, which is way easier than forging something. Close it up, pour the metal in, take it out, knock off the fucking little dicklet hanging off the side, and then you just, polish it up, sharpen it, and bam, weapon. So suddenly, it is way easier to equip lots and lots of people, at least until they run out of bronze. So while they still had bronze, and the tin trade was still flowing in, chariots were already seeing a decline because think about it. If you have a chariot with 4 horses on it, and you get like 20 dudes with spears, and you just do that, you're on the chariot, you're fucked, man. But then once the bronze stopped flowing in, you still had bronze, but it got way too expensive. So people eventually used to move to iron. Not because it's a better metal, which it's not that great compared to bronze. Yeah, it's a little less malleable than bronze, because we think of bronze as being like super soft and iron as being like, But iron is still stronger than bronze overall, but not by much. They moved to iron because it was just easier to find. But iron's also like a massive pain to work, because in order to forge it, you need to have much higher temperatures. With bronze, you could, heat it up in a fucking... I don't know what they use. You could probably fucking light a bonfire, just, put some clay around it, stick the bronze in, and then, bang, 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 forge a weapon. But now that they had better furnaces that let them melt the bronze and cast it, they were hot enough to make iron forgeable. Granted, still a pain in the ass to work with, but way easier to find. So now you just start equipping people with iron spears, and then you get 30 of those dudes. Just... who the fuck needs chariots anymore? You're irrelevant. The last thing that came out of the Bronze Age that is supremely interesting to me is this idea among historians called the Axial Age. Now, this is kind of a contested idea, but personally I really like it, and it's basically this theory that after the Bronze Age collapse, between something like 500 BC and 100 BC, maybe 200, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but in that last part of the first millennium BC, you get a huge religious revolution in like all the important parts of the planet. Where basically prior to this period of time, religion was a very fear-based system. Where basically, if you ever look at Mesopotamian mythology, it must have been fucking terrifying to live with that kind of cosmology, because this was the deal. You lived in a city. Your city had a god. Your god did not really give a shit about your city. Your god gives a shit about your city because your city gives him food, water, sex, and a place to sleep. Yeah, I know you must be wondering, how do you give a god sex? There's a thing called sacred prostitution. It's real. Look it up. Your god cared about your city because it fulfilled all of his animal needs, I guess. And if you didn't fulfill all those, or you pissed him off for some reason, and who knows why you pissed him off, that god would blow up your city. So basically, religion in Mesopotamia and a lot of the other places around the Fertile Crescent was just one giant anxiety coaster of just, ooh, are we gonna get flooded today? I don't know. Which is also, you kind of see it with the, you see echoes of it in the way the Old Testament presents God. Because if you don't know, Old Testament God is metal as fuck. And that's because the Hebrews were a huge part of the Axial Age. Now, the Axial Age is where everyone moves from this, where a ton of people, not everyone, but like a surprising amount of people, move from this fear-based system to a more like contractual system. And I'll run through them all. First is, these aren't in any particular like chronological order, but so you have the Hebrews, right? And they have one of the first brands of monotheism, where there's only one God and you have a contract with him. And your fate in the afterlife is a result of how well you fulfill that contract with him, / do the, whole 10-step plan thing. And then if you go a little to the north, in Greece, you get Greek philosophy, which arose sort of in classical Greece around like the 600s-ish, I think. 600, 500, 400 BC, that period of time. You go a little east, you get Zoroastrianism, which was Persia's sort of like... What's a word for a religion with two gods? Duotheism? I don't know. But it was this philosophy that there's like ultimate good and ultimate evil, and the earth is like their battlefield. And it was this whole thing, and it was a pretty lasting religion throughout the different Persian empires that rose and fell. But it was different from the whole polytheistic, is your city gonna die today because you pissed off your god? We got, if you go further east, you get to India, and this is around the time, Hinduism, what is the name of the fucking text? It begins with a V. I know it begins with a V. Those things and the religion that was based around solely those already existed. Vedas! Fuck! Finally! Okay, the Indo-Aryans came in, created the Vedas, the Native Indians adopted them in the caste system, and then created sort of a religion more so around the Vedas than anything else, and then some more sacred texts got added into the mix. I'm drawing on a religious history of Asia class I took in my freshman year of college, so don't quote me on this, but I think what happened is eventually that built up to Hinduism sometime during the Axial Age, and in addition to that, Buddhism pops up around like 500 BC-ish. So that's two I'm not super sure about the theology of ancient Hinduism, but at least Buddhism was a very different system to the fear-based system that had been going on before. If you move even further east, you get to China, and during the fall of the Shang dynasty, you get this mandate of heaven idea, because what happened is basically a volcano in Crete blew up and then created this huge amount of ash that darkened the sky right around the same time as the Shang dynasty was getting overthrown by the Zhou dynasty, and everyone was like, look, heaven likes our idea. And then that created this whole like social contract in China of where like, if the gods don't like the ruler, they'll send you a sign and then it's okay to overthrow him. And that was the only form of accountability the Chinese emperor had, and then the communists got rid of it, which really sucks. Actually, I don't know if the communists got rid of it. It felt like it was kind of gone by the time the Republican era showed up. Whatever. Point is, that shows up, and then you also get the 100 schools of thought during the Warring States period, which this is a whole other video topic unto itself, but basically, China was never like one thing until like the 200s BC, and this period prior, during the Axial Age, was just a giant war between everyone in like the Chinese area to see who would come out on top as the first Chinese emperor. And it's a fucking chaotic. But you start getting these wandering philosophers who go and help people create their own systems of government, because no one had really tried that before. Because everyone who hadn't been under the one like dynasty that was already there, because it was kind of unified but not really, everyone who wasn't in that was a tribal government before, so all these wandering philosophers started going around telling people how to rule, and then you get Confucianism out of that, and a whole bunch of other super cool philosophies, but I don't have time to go over them now. All these changes more or less happen over the course of like 500 years, which to me is fucking crazy. I don't know. You can say the Axial Age is probably nothing and like is like a crackpot theory or something, but to me that's a pretty fucking big coincidence, you know? So just in case you're not already sold on the Bronze Age collapse, which I know I would be by this point, but if you're not, But I think it's important to kind of look at this period of time, regardless if you want to do it for world building reasons, you just want to study it because it sounds cool, or whatever reason. But there is a huge amount of like weird similarity to our time and the Bronze Age, mostly with the trade complexity stuff, but there's some other stuff in there that might be worth looking at. And this is why periods of societal collapse throughout history appeal to me so much, is because I feel like I'm living in one of those. I don't know about y'all, but it's been 80 years since World War II, you know. Global tensions are rising. Something's gonna happen. But to me, it's really interesting to see those periods of time in history. It assures me that, like, this shit's happened before, humanity will survive, and B, tells me that, like, it sort of shows me what you could expect from that sort of, like, societal collapse, and, you know, what can you do to come out of it okay. But then there's this additional layer of, like, mystery to it, because usually during Dark Ages, reading just fucking, you know, pieces out, and you get this period of time where you have barely any sources on anything, and you can't really get a sense for what the world was like back then, which to me makes it more interesting because there's more room for imagination. And if you put yourself into the shoes of someone living back then, where the world's so much smaller but also so much bigger at the same time, you get this sense of wonder for the world again that I really feel like has gone missing with at least in our age. People kind of don't care about the real world anymore. That's another video I gotta do. And the last thing is, the Bronze Age is this weird period of time where the origins of Western culture and Middle East / Islamic culture split off from each other. Like, back then, they were still sort of the same thing, because I like to think of cultures as, like, people, and, you know, people have their own strengths and weaknesses and differences, and they're all related to each other. But you start recorded history and, like, civilized / settled history with this sort of river basin culture that was around the Eastern Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. After the Bronze Age collapse, you get the rise of descendant cultures out of that. You get, you know, classical Greece, you get Judeo-Christian stuff, you get Persian culture / Iranian culture, you get all this stuff kind of slowly drifts apart. And then we, the West, I mean, descended from, you know, classical Greece, which its descendant was Roman culture, and then that mixed with Germanic culture, plus Christianity to form the West as we know it today. And then the, like, more the Eastern descendants of that, like, Bronze Age culture eventually went on to become Persian culture / Arabian culture, and then they kind of mixed together with Islam and just kind of became its own thing. I think it's interesting that these two cultures that in the modern day we see as very separate from one another used to be kind of part of the same culture. And if you look at Bronze Age culture, you see elements of both Islamic civilization and Western civilization, and it's this weird, like, uncanny valley thing where it's, like, almost familiar, but, like, still so different to where it's like, ooh.
Nice.
But yeah, that was my pitch of why I think the Bronze Age is super cool, and you should all either research it, use it in your world building projects. Hell, I wrote a fucking, how many words? 110,000 word book. I like the Bronze Age so much, and I thought it was so absent from fantasy literature that I kind of just did a Mountain Blade, and I took the Bronze Age, put it into a fantasy world, renamed everything, but, like, not really. And you know what? In my opinion, it was a pretty good book. I think it went pretty well. I might make a video on that. What? That's like 3 promised videos now? Fuck. Don't hold me to any of those. But I hope you enjoyed this. What would you call this? A presentation? I hesitate to call it a video essay, and it's definitely not a history video. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more from me, do hit the buttons. I have the buttons. Yeah, just be on the lookout for my next video. Bye!
gushy.